The solar eclipse may be over, but the sun still gives us a lot to watch, including a couple bright regions and coronal holes. Those stories and more in the news this week. This forecast sponsored in part by Eric Johansson. Check him out at instagram.com/scubist. We're coming down from that solar eclipse back on July 2nd, and space weather's picked up a little bit. We have a couple bright regions that are in Earth view right now, and they're sandwiched by two coronal holes. One of those coronal holes is rotated into the Earth strike zone, and it's sending us a pocket of fast solar wind right now, and it's bringing a little bit of aurora to high latitudes, but nothing down at mid-latitudes. We're going to be calming down from that here in the next day or so, and then in the next couple days, you see that bigger coronal hole that's kind of split in two. That one's going to be rotating into the Earth strike zone, and it could give us a slightly bigger disturbance than the one we're getting right now, and it could mean more aurora for high latitudes and possibly a chance for aurora down at mid-latitudes. Meanwhile, the bright regions you see on the Earth-facing disk are not as bright as we had hoped they'd be. These are the returning regions that we had been watching over at least the last couple rotations, and they are boosting the solar flux up just a tiny bit, but we're still at the high end of poor for radio propagation. So amateur radio operators and emergency responders, sorry about that, but it looks like we're going to continue to suffer with poor conditions for quite some time. Switching to our M-flare threat meter, I know I sound like a broken record, but we do have a spotless sun, and so the X-ray flux continues to be extremely low, and therefore by proxy the solar flux is low. It's going to continue like this over the next week, possibly even 2 weeks, which is good news for GPS users. You guys don't have to worry about any radio blackouts, but amateur radio operators, yes, I know we have poor radio propagation on Earth's dayside, and well, the trend continues. Switching to our solar storm conditions, as you can see, we've been reasonably quiet. Actually, we've been bouncing between quiet conditions and unsettled conditions. The unsettled conditions have been mainly from small pockets of fast solar wind, but because the pockets are so small, the wind isn't all that fast and it's not disturbing us all that much. Nonetheless, it's managed to bring us some aurora, especially around the first to high latitudes, and gave us a little bit of a show here and there. But things have been kind of quiet and just bouncing around, and this is pretty much the story, folks. This is the way it's going to be here now that we're at solar minimum. But we do have a chance here over the next couple days to get a little bit more activity, maybe a skosh of a chance for us to hit active conditions and bring some aurora down to mid-latitudes, but it's going to be a pretty slim. And the field reports from this week are some of the best I've ever had a chance to show, because they include the total solar eclipse, even shots through totality. We've had many field reporters travel down to South America to get some amazing shots all over Chile, like this one in northern Chile. And we had one at La Silla Observatory. We've had shots at the Elqui Valley, and several shots in La Serena. Here's a shot from Puclaro Lake. And how about this ethereal shot while walking out with the Pacific Ocean, looking like you want to capture the sun? Now, the total solar eclipse wasn't the only thing that made a stunning appearance this week. We also had some noctilucent clouds and aurora, like this gorgeous aurora in the northern hemisphere seen in Saskatchewan. And here's one in Manitoba. We had some gorgeous noctilucent clouds in Alberta. And the aurora even made an appearance down under at New Zealand. So what else does our sun have in store for us this week? Well, this is stereo A. It's our partial backside monitor. You can see here's Earth, here's the sun, and here's stereo A staring at the sun pretty much from the side. And you can see those bright regions that are rotating off to stereo's west limb. Those are the bright regions that are now in Earth view. And actually, when they were in stereo's view, they were actually firing a couple solar storms. But ever since they've come into Earth view, they've been pretty quiet, which tells us that they're continuing to decay. So they will get more dim and more dim as time goes on. Unfortunately, there's just not a lot more to report after that. We got a small coronal hole that's going to be rotating into Earth view here in the next few days. And in about 10 days, it could possibly give us a little bit of fast solar wind. But but it's really not going to be all that much. It could only bring aurora to high latitudes. As far as active regions or bright regions are concerned, well, it looks pretty bad here. So amateur radio operators and emergency responders, it looks like once those big bright regions rotate off of the sun's west limb from Earth's view, stereo's telling us we're not going to see anything for probably the next 2 weeks. Switching to your solar storm conditions and aurora possibilities over the coming week, we are still feeling the effects from that fast solar wind from that first of 2 coronal holes that's rotating in through the Earth's strike zone. At high latitudes, NOAA is expecting unsettled conditions with up to about a 25% chance of a minor storm. At mid-latitudes, we're only expecting unsettled conditions with about 20% chance of active conditions, but this is a pretty weak disturbance, so not really expecting any aurora at mid-latitudes most likely. Now this will continue to settle down over the next couple days, but then we get the second of the 2 coronal holes rotating in through the Earth strike zone, so expect another chance for disturbance starting around Tuesday, and it could bring us some aurora down to high latitudes. I don't think it'll make mid-latitudes, but there is still a chance. Switching to your solar flare and particle radiation storm outlook over the coming week, everything is still in the green when it comes to big solar flares. We have no risk for radio blackouts right now because we do have a spotless sun. We do have a couple bright regions on the Earth-facing sun right now, but they're not really doing all that much. So this is good news for you GPS users. We have no issues with reception on Earth's dayside, but amateur radio operators and emergency responders, I'm sure you're not liking these solar flux numbers. We're staying in the high 60s, which means poor radio propagation on Earth's dayside for you all. And unfortunately, with stereo's view not showing any other bright regions rotating into Earth view anytime soon, these conditions are going to continue easily over the next 2 weeks. Now, as we switch to our cosmic ray flux, we are at solar minimum, so the flux is a bit higher than it normally would be. So you frequent flyers, and this does include air crew who fly at 800 hours annually and fly at high latitudes and high altitudes, you are in the moderate range for radiation dose, and this does include prenatal passengers, so please take this into consideration in your flight plans. So the space weather this week has been very interesting. We had that total solar eclipse back on July 2nd, and we had some amazing field reports from South America. And since then, now we're dealing with some fast wind from some coronal holes that are rotating in through the Earth strike zone this week, and they could bring aurora down to high latitudes, possibly a minor chance for aurora at mid-latitudes over the latter part of this week, but we shall see. So you aurora photographers, hey, even though it's a solar minimum sun, you know, not all hope is lost. Now, as far as amateur radio responders and emergency responders go, well, things aren't looking quite so good. We do have those bright regions that are in Earth view right now. The bad thing is that they look like they're continuing to decay, and they're not really boosting the solar flux nearly as much as we had hoped. We're still sitting at the poor levels for radio propagation on Earth's dayside, and unfortunately, there's no other bright regions, it seems, on the sun at all, front side or back side, and so these poor conditions are easily going to continue over the next week and possibly 2 weeks before we get a reprieve. The only good news is that GPS users, well, you guys like it when the solar flux is low, especially at low latitude. It helps you out quite a bit. So enjoy really good GPS reception pretty much all around the globe. I'm Tamitha Scove. Thank you for watching.